I would like to ask you something. Do you think Christian faith supports the model of development adopted by many countries in the world? How do we answer, as Christian people, to the reality of destruction of the planet related to an unsustainable development? How do we answer theologically to this perception of development as unlimited growth that demands the unlimited increasing of production and consumption? How can Christian faith and our theological traditions answer to the suffering and the damage caused by this neoliberal capitalism to the earth and to the people excluded from the market? I want to suggest that Christian tradition offers some inspiring elements which help us to rethink this model of development. The first example I will point to comes from the Gospel of John chapter 10, especially the verse 10, which says, "I came that they may have life and may have it abundantly." But going further, I also suggest how we can dialogue with other contributions from other cultures. The second suggestion is therefore the example of the well-living, or buen vivir. This concept is a way of social organization quite common by indigenous people in Latin America. It is a good example of how we can drink from other traditions, different from the absolute Western culture, to criticize the Western patterns of society. The third example is the African concept of Ubuntu. It is a traditional concept which has already used or was already used by the Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu, especially in the context of the post-apartheid South Africa. But in this case, I want to suggest it as a critical model to the Western perception of development. Initially, I want to suggest that the chapter 10 of the Gospel of John is a good clue of what type of good life God wants for us. When Jesus says, "I came that they may have life and may have it abundantly," he is presenting his main objective, to give good life to his people. However, it is still vague. What is the good life Jesus offers? Someone could say, as many do, that this good life is economic prosperity. In these terms, the answer to the question I made at the beginning, if Christian faith supports this type of development, will be yes. That's why we must look more attentively to the whole text and understand in which context Jesus says that. It is quite interesting to notice that this sentence is in the Good Shepherd parable. In this parable, Jesus is the gate and also the shepherd. The sheep listen to his voice, know him, and trust his guidance. The shepherd knows all the sheep individually and notices if someone of them is missing. However, he relates to them collectively. Jesus, as the good shepherd, acts differently than the thief, for example, and the mercenary who come to steal in the night and abandon the sheep when the wolf comes. On contrary, the good shepherd gives his own life for the sheep. According to the parable, the abundant and good life is related to the kind of relationship the good shepherd has with his sheep. Jesus is not individual shepherd, even though he knows them personally and by the name. The shepherd guides the sheep together, collectively. It is also interesting to observe the relationship among the sheep. They live together. They don't fight for the green pasture. In fact, they all need to live in a good field, and if it's not so, all of them will suffer together. No sheep is better than others. They need to live together and in harmony, trusting in the voice of the good shepherd. If the mercenary guides them, they will be on risk, because the mercenary doesn't offer his own life for the sheep. We can, therefore, understand from this parable that the good and abundant life God offers us is not a life with abundant material goods. It's a life in which everyone must have a part on the field. It's not a life based on individualism. God doesn't guide us individually, but collectively. as a community, although He knows us by the name. So we can say that this perception of God, of good life, offers us critical tools to analyze the actual model of development. A development that creates social and economic inequality, wealth concentration that destroys nature, is not the type of life that the Good Shepherd promises. We must hear this voice that calls us through other ways to live in harmony with other people and with the planet. In the present moment, we might be listening to the mercenary's voice. This is just a brief example of how we can find in our own Christian tradition good sources to reflect about development and to criticize it, suggesting other patterns of social organization. I would like to mention also briefly other two concepts, living well or buen vivir and Ubuntu, both from outside of the Christian tradition, but useful and powerful concepts which could inspire us to create new and abundant life. The concept of living well can be found in many indigenous cultures in Latin America, but especially in Ecuador and Bolivia. It can be described as collective life, which respects diversity and promotes harmony among people and with the nature. We don't see ourselves as different from others and from the Mother Earth, so that it's absolutely contrary to the individualism. Wholeness, integrity and respect are important notions. All the people need each other. And we also need the nature to have a good and abundant life. Development is when all the life grows together in respect and solidarity. Another powerful idea is Ubuntu, a traditional South African concept which means a person just becomes a person through other persons. Living together and the respect to others is absolutely necessary to have a good life. I just can be fully human if the other person can be fully human as well. It is powerful and a critical tool to the notion of development constructed on the basis of disputation and individualism. There is no Ubuntu where there is wealth concentration on one side and poverty on the other. There is no Ubuntu where there is destruction of the nature. We cannot be fully human if others are not fully humans. So we see in these three examples the abundant life the Good Shepherd offers us, the Latin American living well, and the South African Ubuntu, how important it is to oppose individualism. That's why the solution for our problems must be constructed collectively. It must be constructed by the communities, by the churches acting together, by the social movements. It is constructed when we go together to the streets and when we fight for justice together. It is important when we do that to have a good theological background and a good theological symbol or symbols and concepts so that we can act in the world inspired by our faith, and so we can offer other perceptions of good life. That's the only way we will be able to construct other type of human development.